Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 5, the final day of the Creative Compass Challenge, where you will learn to put your art and writing at the top of your to do list, not at the bottom where it falls off and gets lost. So, this is the final day of very simple and straightforward exercises that can totally unlock your ability to start finishing your amazing creative work without having to feel in control of every other thing in your life first. And I see people here today already. Hello, Chris. Hello, Laura. Hello, Judy. Other people who are here live, who have been with me all week doing this challenge live. And I would love to hear from you if you're starting to see any effect. Are you actually starting to get a little bit of time devoted to your creative work with a little bit less angst and pain and anxiety around that? Just a little bit at a time would make a huge difference over time, as we've discussed many times this week. The Creative Engine Masterclass, to be clear, is a approximately 90-minute class. It's longer than this. And what it does is it helps you investigate the elements, the stages, the phases of your creative process and diagnose where you're getting stuck in that cycle of the creative process. And then specifically, once you know what's going on with it, you can use some of the techniques that you learned this week in the Creative Compass Masterclass or in the Creative Compass Challenge to start to address some of those blocks, some of those issues that come up regularly, and smooth out your process towards creating great work. Art is never easy. It's not about being easy. We are not here because it's easy. We're here because it matters and we care. But what we don't want is to add extra complication and anxiety and pain to the creative process. And that's what tends to happen. Okay, so let's get to today's content. We are going to talk today about how to start breaking down and identifying the very specific tasks that you can do next in order to, and I've talked about this all week, the idea of conscious decision making, knowing what you're deciding on, knowing the criteria, and making decisions, strategic decisions that matter to you so that you can stick with them is super important. And making those decisions in a separate moment from actually trying to do the work is also super important. And that's what habit building is all about. So you're deciding ahead of time what is going to happen, when it's going to happen, and so on. But a lot of things that you're going to be doing are not actually habit. Like the habit doesn't answer the question of like, what's next, right? So in today's lesson, we talked about the idea of projects versus tasks. I'll talk about that in a minute. And also how you can break down those tasks and break them down into something very, very rational and achievable. I'd love to hear right now takeaways from day 4. We talked about the inner critic, the should monster yesterday. It's a very emotional topic. It's got a lot of us under its thumb, the inner critic sometimes. And so we talked about some techniques to try to befriend your inner critic and take away some of its power over you. And so I'd love to hear if you have some takeaways from that lesson yesterday. All right, I'm seeing some good stuff here. Marcia says, I'm late to this party, just joining live for the first time today, but except for day 5, yes, you've done all the homework. Excellent. Yes, you people who come in a little bit late to the challenge, you can go back and get everything. Our podcast feed has everything through right now including the coaching. So if you just want to listen through while you're doing your day, you absolutely can do that. You can come back and revisit this material later. Let's see. Judy says she's done the habit stacking on Tuesday. I put it into practice on Thursday with stellar results. I've been struggling with gaining a steady flow. Identifying a stacking sequence was laborious Tuesday and Wednesday, yet so worth the time. What a release. Thank you. Oh, that's awesome. I'd love to hear that. Yes, it does take a little bit of work because you're taking all of that deciding work that stops you on a daily basis from doing the thing and you're front loading it. And so of course it's going to be a little difficult and there may be some, bumps on the road to work out. But once you have it all in place, you have made those decisions already and you trust those decisions. You know they're the right decisions. And so you can just roll through it without having to have that friction with getting started. Simone says, belated but wholehearted yes. Woo, all right. Okay. Yes, PCM has been inviting friends and my younger son. I love it. Thank you. Philip Brown's takeaway, the inner critic is so tied to evaluation, hence the term critic. What I realize is my worth and the worth of my creative work is constant and exists outside evaluation. It's kind of like focusing on process over product. Perfect. I love that, Philip. That is exactly what I was trying to get at when we were talking about this idea of assigning money value and not feeling like you deserved to do work if it didn't have monetary value, if you couldn't sell it or weren't selling enough of it or hadn't yet sold enough of it or whatever it is, that's all irrelevant when it comes to the actual work itself and the value of the work itself. So thank you for that. Heidi says, I loved imagining what to say back to the inner critic. Yes, it takes a little imagination. And, again, it's a thing that will, even just by sparking that idea that you can say something doesn't mean you're going to have all the answers immediately. But if you start trying over time, you'll find different ways to investigate what that's all about and have answers that work and all that other stuff. Heidi adds, I was surprised by how emotional yesterday was, as I'm not an emotional person. Lots of writing to do here, and I bought Nicole's book. Great. Nicole's book is going to be very useful for you. And yeah, I think that sometimes when we feel like we're not an emotional person, it's because we're not allowing access to that. And every once in a while, something will come in sideways and kind of get you. And I'm glad that it affected you, and I'm glad that you are finding a method to handle that. Susie's takeaway was to go listen to my interview with Nicole, which was amazing. It was amazing. She's amazing, and stirred up a lot of old stuff, but I know what to say to those monsters. Excellent. I love it. Oh, sorry, that was Joanne. That was not Heidi, who said that she was surprised by how emotional yesterday was. Even the idea of talking with or back to the inner critic is a revelation to me. It seems I had a lot to say back to her that was reassuring, says Heidi. Excellent. Okay. I'm really, really happy to get your feedback on this. And if you're coming to this later and you're seeing this recording or you're listening to this audio, you can always email us at contact@jessicaable.com, and we'd love to hear your feedback on this. Okay, so let's get into day 4. Excuse me, day 5 of the Creative Compass Challenge. We're going to get into day 5 of the Creative Compass Challenge now. And this is the big kind of flip around of today's lesson is that goal setting is tricky, right? Because when you set a goal, it gives you a direction to go in. And that is very, very important. We talked about that on day 1. You have a goal, you have a thing you want to make. But if you spend too much time thinking about that goal and focusing on that goal, a couple of things happen. First of all, you may lose sensitivity to when that goal turns out not to be the right goal for you somehow. There's some reason why it's not the right goal, and you may be single-mindedly focusing on it and not be open to what's actually happening around you and whether this turns out to be the right thing or not. So that's number 1. But number 2 is it opens the door for perfectionism. Perfectionism being fear about the future, trying to lock everything down before you start, make sure everything's going to be safe before you step out on that wire. And it's not possible to assure those things. And therefore, it stops you from starting. Because if it's not possible, you're not going to do it. You're not going to actually feel safe. And it's 100% safe and 100% secure that everything's going to be fine. And if you're going to let that stop you, you're going to be stopped permanently. So the goal setting, and in fact, goal may be the wrong word, but the vision setting, the direction setting, the pointer is essential so that you have focus, so that you know what matters to you, so that you're heading in a direction that you care about. All those things are really important. But then you have to stop looking at that goal and just look at what's in front of you right here, right now. Chris posted in the beginning of the chat. Chris has been our show up early and raise his hand student. I love it. Every day he's been posting takeaways and what he's been doing, which is great. So he posted his specific task that he has added to his list. And I think the ongoing quota task is drawing in my notebook, practice drawing intentionally for story ideation. And then he lists 3 different tasks that he's going to try in that time slot. And as long as you are aware, like you keep your eyes on story ideation. I just want to think about stories. I want to come up with what my story is about. That's the goal. The goal is small. The goal is something you can achieve within a few weeks of trying different things out. Maybe a few hours, maybe a few minutes, who knows, right? There's a range, but it's not going to be forever. But it's this minimal thing. But then there's a vision, which is then finishing the story, which you're heading towards. But you need to put that out of your head and just think, I just want to find a story. I just want to find a story that's cool, that I like, that's inspiring to me, and just focus on that thing that's right in front of me. And that's going to allow you to keep moving forward because the stakes are much lower, right? When you're just coming up with an idea, you don't have to think about what's going to happen with that idea. Are you going to be able to achieve greatness with this idea? Will people read this idea? Will they like this idea? Put all that out of your head. Does not matter. What matters is the idea feels good to you, that you feel like you fully explored it in the way you want to explore it. Those are the kinds of things that you want to have right in front of you as to keep you actually functioning and moving forward. So, as we've talked about on day 2 with habits, sometimes the habit building itself, the initial habit building can be difficult, but once you have a habit, it's an incredible tool because sometimes the things you need to do are scary, or they're boring, or they're annoying. There are all kinds of different things that may come up in the course of doing a creative project, no matter how awesome it is. There's going to be parts where you're like, oh, seriously, I can't believe I have to do this. And if you have the habit, it's going to get you through it. Okay. So staying focused on your goal, sort of focused on your goal, means not staying focused on your goal. Zen koan of the day. Because if you look at it too hard, you're just going to get stuck. So we're going to break it down into tasks. We talked about in the lesson today the difference between a project and a task. I believe we talked about this also on day 2 when we talked about habits. A project is anything that has multiple steps in it in order to complete it. And in my definition of a project, most often there's something unanswered at the middle of it. There's something you don't know. You don't know exactly what it's going to look like or how you're going to get from here to there. And I distinguish that from another idea, which I call a process, which is something that may be creative, but it's something you do over and over again. And you don't really get stuck because it's a thing that you kind of know all the steps of. So for example, say you have an email newsletter. Oh, just say, I can't imagine anybody here would have an email newsletter, but say you have an email newsletter and as you get started on your newsletter, just setting up the tech for your newsletter, figuring out how you're going to, do all that stuff. That's a project. Figuring out what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. Coming up with a methodology and an approach and a voice and thinking like, well, how do I write this thing and what the format look like on that and all those kinds of things. That's a project. But once you've been writing your newsletter every week or 2 weeks, every month for, I don't know, a year or whatever, it's not that you never have to think about it. You don't have to come up with ideas, but you have methods for coming up with ideas. You have some idea of how long it's going to take in your week. It becomes more normalized and more of a process. And when that happens, you're more able to continue writing your newsletter and also do something else that's going to require a lot of decision-making and creativity and whatever else. That's how, as human beings, we manage to do more than one thing at a time because some of those things are in process stage where you just are repeating, you're going through steps that you know, and a few of those things, just a few, are like really tough nut projects you've got to crack. So anything that has multiple steps inside of it, and this is the key. I learned this from David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, many, many years ago, and it was a big moment for me, was this thing that even things that look really, really small often have multiple steps inside of them. And if you can identify what those steps are, and you can use the technique QTAs, questions to answer, that I gave you in this lesson to do that, you're more likely to be able to move forward because you have this, like, you can look at each individual thing and go, oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. So even, things like making a dentist appointment, if you are going to the same dentist you've always gone to, and it's just a biannual checkup, cleaning or whatever, it's literally making a phone call. You have to have your calendar open and you got to know kind of when you can go, call the dentist and you make an appointment, boom, you're done. But what if your dentist retired? Well, then you've got to find a new dentist. What if there's some kind of, medical process going on. And so you have to plan around it because you're going to be like, you have Novocaine and you can't, you know what I mean? So there's it's still simple, but there are multiple steps. And if you know that doing something is going to require those, if you look at it and go, this is going to require steps, and you break those steps down, then it sort of unlocks your ability to actually do the thing. And this is the secret to even really dumb stuff that's on your to-do list that you just don't do. So there's 2 reasons why things sit on your to-do list like that. One is the thing, just this thing that's been sitting there for weeks or months. Everybody think right now, what is that thing? Put it in the chat. I want to see what your one thing is that's like just sits and you're just like, oh my God, I have to do that thing. There's two reasons why that will be sitting there. One reason is it's just really freaking annoying. And you know exactly how to do it, but it's just like, you're gonna have to open up 25 tabs and you have to sit on hold for an hour and you have to do all of this stuff, right? And it's annoying and you don't want to do it and you're just resisting it because you have a life and this is not how you want to spend it. I get that. Okay. And the answer to that is find a spot on your calendar and schedule it and just bite the bullet and do it. Right. But make a calendar slot for it. So you're not trying to fit it in around things. That's number one. Number two is there are multiple steps. There are many steps in there and you're not acknowledging what they are. So I'm looking at the things that are showing up in the chat. Order air purifier from Robin. That's a good example of a project, right? It's not just okay, maybe it's just exactly what you want and you just have to go over to, Best Buy or something and order it. Probably though there's research involved, right? Which air purifier, how much volume does it need to process? Which is the best one, all that other kind of stuff, right? So break down what those steps are and give yourself one of those steps per day to finish that thing so that you don't have to do them all at the same time. And if researching is going to take you a long time, use quota tasks. So quota tasks, to review from the lesson, quota tasks are tasks that are a period of time, not an outcome. So it's not research until I'm done. It's research for 15 minutes and then do it again tomorrow or do it again in 2 days and research for 15 minutes. If you're going to do that and you'll be picking things up again, you're going to want to hold on to, what tabs you were at and whatever. Make sure you're taking notes so that you don't lose your place, because that just means that you're going to be taking more time over it. But it may be like, depending on how specific the kind of research is that you want to do, it may take a while. And so you may want a couple sessions on it instead of trying to do it all in one day and fit it in all in one day. Lillian says, calling my bereaved friend. Okay, so I want to say this in a totally different way. This is not an annoying task. This is a painful task. This is a task that has emotions attached to it. It's not that complicated, but it is something that is going to take emotional fortitude and feeling strong. So similarly to the file my taxes or something like that you know how to do, but it's really annoying and you avoid it. Calling a bereaved friend means making an appointment with yourself to do that, saying, when are you going to do it? Where are you going to be when you do it? Do you need to prepare yourself somehow by like having a cup of tea or something like that? Thinking about those kinds of things will help you make this real, especially if you can picture like where you will be. That will help make it real, very much like creating a habit, pre-deciding how it's going to happen. That can help something like that happen. Michelle says, meditate. This is a habit to build. This is not a one-time task. So that's the difference there, is that you're you're saying like, meditate. It's not a task, it's a habit. And so if it's a habit, it needs a habit stack. It needs a place and a time, and you need to make an agreement with yourself that's going to happen. I would say wait a few weeks for that, because right now you're working on your creative habit. But when you feel like that's more solid, then think, when, where, how am I going to do my meditation habit? What's that going to look like? Where will I be? What happens right before? What happens right after? And fit it into your day in a way that actually works and that you've created space for it ahead of time and decided ahead of time. Marcia says, send a card to my aunt. Okay, so get a card, find your aunt's address, figure out what to write it, find a stamp, write the thing, get it to the post office. All those things are steps. It may seem really stupid to break them all down, but if you're resisting it day after day after day, that is going to be the answer. So you can do one thing at a time, go like, find a card, boom, got that one. What's next? When can I schedule that? When can I do that thing? Okay, so I'm seeing lots and lots of answers here. Everybody's got them, right? Everybody's got these things. And those two basic things, either it's annoying and difficult, it's going to be painful in that sense, or it's emotionally painful, emotionally difficult. So that's sort of one category of things, which may be overlapping with it's actually a project. It's actually a multi-step project. You don't know you haven't thought through how to break it down. And so you need to actually go and do that work. that is the job that I want to give you. Now, the other thing I want to say though is if you're going to, let me just pick something off the list here. PCM says, pulling my book from the bum publisher. Okay, so that is definitely a project. If you need to pull your book from a bad publisher, that means you need to do research, you need to find all of your, your correspondence with this person. What's your contract? How can you do it? Draft the thing, all those. There's a bunch of different pieces to it. And breaking those things down is going to be really essential. I'm trying to see, where is it? Newsletter? Okay, feedback, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I'm going to pick something bigger, like working on say a podcast or something like that, launching a podcast. If you have a project or a goal, a vision of launching a podcast, and you try to plan every single step of it right now, you will A, get things very wrong about the timeline and what's in the project, and B, get super bogged down and overwhelmed by all the things. So your job for today is to break down just the first few steps, the first phase of the work. So breaking down the work into phases, working backwards from what you know, and then just breaking out only the first phase of work. When you're well into it, the world, life will give you feedback, which will help you make better decisions and know more about how the rest of the project is going to play out. And so you plan the next phase, and the next phase after that. So the final thing I want to talk about is this idea of questions to answer. We don't have time to go into it in detail, but there's some information about it in the lesson. And of course, we teach it in the Creative Focus Workshop. But the idea of questions to answer is when you're stuck on something, stuck on some part, like, how do I get out of this deal with my bum publisher? You need to think, okay, what have other people done? What does my contract say? What does, generate questions about it. Think about what are the things you don't know, make a list of those things, and that will help you identify what your next actions are. And so the point of questions to answer is not necessarily to know the answers instantly, but to pull the problem apart into smaller, more solvable threads. And so you can go at sort of one thing at a time, one aspect at a time. All right, let me see if there's some questions here. I've got a couple of questions. So Jennifer says, can you talk just a bit about doing the habit 7 days a week versus just 5 and taking a break? I think that taking breaks is super important. And I also think that we can have different templates for different kinds of days. It may be in a normal life, you can only do this creative habit 3 days a week or 2 days a week. But if those 2 days have other features that you can attach to, then it still can be a very solid habit and really work. I give you the example of Taco Tuesday. In my household, we have Taco Tuesday. Every Tuesday is Taco Tuesday. And because my children insist on it, we have guacamole and quesadillas every single week. I don't eat it every single week, but they eat it every single week. It's once a week, right? It's only once a week. It's not an everyday habit, but we do it. It's like by Sunday, we're sourcing avocados every week, right? So if you're going to do a habit less than every day, it's not going to be an everyday habit. You still need to think about building in various kinds of triggers. And for most people, the 5 days of the work week have a different texture than weekends do. And so there's going to be different patterns and different triggers. And so doing a 5-day habit and having 2 days off seems completely fine to me. Each person is very individual. I mean, one of the basic tenets of how I teach the Creative Focus Workshop and everywhere is this idea that every single thing we're doing needs to be molded around your unique situation. Whatever's going on with you needs to be a factor in how this all plays out. And so depending on what your life looks like, that could be a very good plan, or it could be a terrible one. I can't possibly know from this stage, but I think probably it is a very workable one. Okay. All right, Jennifer also says, I've broken down my project into tasks for one 30-minute segment every day, but I have a deadline that means I need to work more than that or I won't finish. Is the 30-minute task breakdown really meant to just be one for the day? Well, I mean, if you're going to be doing more, that is okay. I think that the important thing is that you have at least the trigger for starting your work and start putting that into place. If you're on deadline and you're going to be working more, you're going to be working more. I do think it's super important not to exhaust yourself and, try to cram and do all-nighters and just work yourself to the bone, that kind of work will burn you out. If you're in a situation right now where you just got to do it because that's what you got to do, well, that's life, and you'll get through it. But that's the purpose of a habit, really, is to spread out the work over a long period of time. I'm actually working on a really great case study right now with a longtime client named Maggie Winall, who's a quilter. And Maggie is had a quilt top that she got stuck on it for technical reasons, and then it sat for 30 years. And she finally finished it a couple years ago, I think. And since then, she's done 17 more quilts. So, and she did that basically by lowering the bar on what she expected of herself. Before that, she was thinking, I need to be working 24/7 all the time. I've got to be doing this stuff all the time, or I'm not a real artist. But when she started to say, no, actually, I can do a little bit of this each day and still live my life and sleep and, not make myself crazy, and I will make enormous amounts of progress. So this is something that's very, very important. This is that James Clear chart that I shared on the Habits Day, where it shows the plateau, or the valley of disappointment, or whatever it is. The whole the idea of the curve of latent potential, that you have this. At first, you think things are just not working, but you have to stick with it. And when you do, and you chip away at it in small ways for a long period of time, you go up through this curve and achieve way more than if you wait and try to do everything in a rush at the end. So I'm not trying to bust you, Jennifer, for having a deadline and being on deadline, but I just it's an opportunity, I think, to talk about that as well. So yes, finish your deadline, and then try to hold on to that kind of regular daily practice. Okay, so Judy says, I love the design of the Creative Compass Challenge. I prefer the scheduled sessions, but when I had other commitments, I could shift to the iPhone to view materials and then percolate. The Google Forms for feedback went so smoothly, and the video capture is great for areas of review. Thank you so much. Day 2 and 5 helped fill in skill gaps for me. Judy, thank you for saying that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm so glad that you shared that. And I hope you've tried the audio podcast as well, because I think that is a super great way to be able to really layer this in with your real life. All right, everybody. We're basically there. We've done it. You've done it. You did the entire thing. You're here. Oh my gosh. You are heroes. You've gone through this every day with me. You're doing your homework. Congratulations. You are champions. You've done it. And I really, really want to hear how it goes for you as you go forward in your life. How's your habit working? What are the questions that you have? What are the additional challenges that you have? What have you finished as a result of putting your creative work at the top of your to-do list instead of down at the bottom where it does not belong? Put it up at the top where we all know it belongs. Thanks for being here.